Welcome back to Evolving Waves, where we ride the tides of adversity to reach the shores of success. I'm your host, Neil Schulman, and I am thrilled to be joined by Megan Brown, a woman that I was going to call an entrepreneur in this introduction, but she corrected me, said that she likes to refer to herself as an intrapreneur, so that's what we'll go with today. And we'll get into what that means in a little bit, but just for now, to get the episode kicked off, you should know that Megan is a dynamic individual who overcame quite a bit of adversity in her life to get to where she is today. And so much so, in fact, that we cannot possibly condense everything about her story into just one show. So we're going to have to make it 3 shows. We're going to have to make it a mini series because there's just so much here. And today we're going to kick off that mini series, if you will, with part 1, which is going to get into her childhood and the early challenges. To sort of set the stage for what's coming next. And it's going to get a bit heavy at times, but I think that's important to do in order to truly encapsulate who and what Megan Brown has become as an individual. But before we get into her story, we do want to quickly shout out our sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Stingray Branding, a national lead generation focused marketing agency that helps businesses generate an ROI from their marketing efforts, including web design, social media, Google Ads, email, automations, and more. And they have, in fact, won some awards for their marketing prowess. So, to learn more about them, please visit stingraybranding.com. And with that said, we are so happy to welcome Megan Brown into our studio today to tell her story. So, Megan, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to tell your story.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
We're excited to have you. And let's just jump right in because there's so much here, and it starts so early on. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and how it shaped you into who you are today.
Sure. So, most people who know me, they know most of my story. I'm very open. I talk to people all the time, but I would start with my parents separated and divorced when I was very young. So we were 3, 5, and 7 when they separated. I'm the middle child, so I was 5 years old. My parents did not get along while we were growing up. So we had 2 restraining orders. There was an order at one point that they couldn't drive into the driveway to pick us up and drop us off. My mother was not very reliable, so the school actually banned her from picking us up because she wouldn't show up and they would have to call somebody to come get us. She was the one that paid child support. My dad did have custody of us, all of us, until I was about 13 years old. My dad kept us when my mom left, and she had to fight for her rights. So my mom, in the 90s, that was unheard of. My dad was our safe space, and he was amazing. But my mom had all of the burden of being the absent parent, and she was not happy about it, mostly because she didn't want to pay for the kids that she didn't want. We were weaponized as children, and you'll see that in lots of divorce cases even now. I think they're starting to kind of revert that side of things and give dads more rights where they didn't used to have them. Like in the 90s, that was not the case. My dad was very fortunate that my mom left, but now they're trying to overturn some of that and give people 50-50 and have more rights for dads and more uniformity for the children. And that was not how I was raised. So we start with separation.
Start with separation, and we start with you being the middle child. So that I know is a very interesting dynamic. I mean, a lot of my friends, a lot of my relatives are either only children or they're one of 2. I don't know a whole lot of 3 children families. So just tell me a little bit about the impact of being a middle child and just the dynamic overall there.
Sure. So, of course, usually, so my sister is the oldest. Usually, when a parent leaves, the oldest takes on the role of that parent, or at least tries to. My dad was great about not allowing that. He wanted to keep my sister a child, and he did really well at mitigating her want to hurt us as children. As the middle child, I was the one that had radical empathy and a lot of feelings on how things would go and who had what. I remember thinking if my daddy has all 3 of us, then my mom has nobody. And not that she deserved anybody for sure, and when we'll get more into that, but my ability to want to help came from feeling like I needed to fill space for people who were hurting, and my mom was hurting. She was very vocal about it, and so that was where I kind of came into the picture as the middle child, as radical empathy, sensitivity to other people. I also developed a lot of hyper independence because my dad was working a lot. He had 3 kids and a mortgage he couldn't afford, a brand new mortgage he couldn't afford, and my mom was just kind of absent. So I dealt with a lot of that by having hyper independence, no attachment, no sentimental stuff, just wanting to help individuals.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that there's a lot of empathy that I think is baked into us as children. We maybe, if anything, lose it as we get older, as we see the world for what it is, or at least how we perceive it to be. But I think at that young age, it's definitely tough to have all that empathy in you in a normal sense, as opposed to like you learning it. You were born with it, and then for you in that state to see your parents split up. So and especially to see one parent be clearly better, I guess, than the other one.
You know what's funny? My dad, I don't think he was better. I think he was actually destroyed by my mom leaving because she did leave. Um, but my dad was really good at not bringing us into his adult problems. And that was the difference between the two for the most part is like I had every adult problem put on me from my mother, and my dad did everything he could. He did not talk about custody. He did not talk about child support. He did not talk about arrangements with us. He told us every time we went to talk to a guardian ad litem, like, you tell them what you want. You tell them whatever you're not going to upset me. You tell them whatever you're feeling. And my mom was not the same. So, very different background on both sides.
Yeah, and I guess I mean this is the more natural point where I ask about what it was like to be in the middle of your parents' divorce. You kind of touched on that, but and talk about how it impacted you going through, going to school, going through your day-to-day life and all that.
We struggled a ton. My brother was still in daycare because he's the youngest. I was in kindergarten. My sister was in second grade. Our teachers were phenomenal. I think I struggled less than Lauren. My sister had a lot more like guidance counselor visits and things. She remembers more. For me, I struggled with paying attention and wanting to fix things. So being absent minded in the school sense and wanting to just make things better at home. And no matter where that was my goal.
Gotcha. So, talk a little bit, if you
No
don't mind,
worries.
about the impacts that the different environments, at not just with your parents when you were going to
Yeah, I can
visit, so
start
to
over.
speak, but just
Okay.
when you were with them for
What was
extended
your
periods
question?
of time, even before and after the divorce, how that impacted you both emotionally and
Oh, that's right. That's
physiologically.
right. So I don't remember much of my parents being together. I don't have a lot of memories because I was so young of them actually being in a house together or what that dynamic was like. I do know that once they separated, our households were very different in terms of who we were with and at what times. And my dad was the safety. My dad was the house we could have friends at. My dad was the I would say he wasn't intentionally lax, but I think survival mode definitely took over for both my parents. And so, like, we had less be this, eat the right way, use a fork at my dad's house. We were kind of feral. But we were also like, we were happy. And so it didn't matter. Like, if your room was messy, it didn't matter. Like, you didn't have to be perfect at my dad's, and we were safe at my dad's. At my mother's, it was a battle of perfection. It was eat the right way, do the right things, keep your room clean, don't make noise because my stepdad worked third. My mom was always asleep or tired or had a headache. And so, like, we did not have friends over. We did not have toys that make noise. We were pretty much TV kids at my mom's house. And that kind of transfers into my life now, unfortunately. So,
So yeah, I mean, there are obviously some difficult elements to get through there when you're talking about having to battle for perfection, as you put it. It does, though, sound like at least there was some empathy and some effort on your mom's part in terms of making you eat right. Like there are health benefits to eating right. I mean, I guess there are good habits that are derived from keeping a clean room as opposed to like living like a slob. So, do you attribute any of your positive traits today to living with your mother, or do you attribute them all just from trial and error?
No, I actually, so it's funny because the few things that I will attribute to my mother are I am very clean, and we spent lots of time cleaning at my mom's house. I am very clean, and I appreciate that aspect of things. And I also learned my mom spent a lot of time chasing a someone to support her, someone to um, take care of her, and I learned very early that what that looks like is control and negativity. And so I am when I tell you hyper independence is one of my worst traits, probably, but one of my best. Like, I did everything I could to own my own stuff and have my own things and not, like, do not leave a toothbrush in my house because you do not live here. You do not own things here. Like, that is something that I only got from watching her be so dependent on people. There are a lot of things that I would say came out that are positive and that I had to learn myself for sure, but only because of the example that was set.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect person, and none of us are born perfect. And I think a lot of us learn behaviors as opposed to are born with them. I guess there are some exceptions, like empathy we were talking about earlier. I guess that is kind of baked into our DNA. But for the most part, we pick up things from other people we're around,
Mhm.
even if those people are less than perfect themselves. Um, I want to move on to what you said about yourself, about your life in your early teens. At first, you said that you had a come to Jesus sort of moment with yourself at age 15. So tell us a little bit about that and what led up to it.
Okay, so I'll have to backtrack a little bit because I will say that I grew up at my mom's house. We had a lot of access to pills and alcohol. Every ailment had a pill, and my stepdad was an alcoholic, so he was very interested in everyone around him drinking. He was not
Kids included.
kids included. If you didn't drink, he did not like you. We had several of his friends that would come and go when they would get sober because their wives would give them ultimatums. They would disappear. We'd never see them again. And they could be at our house, basically living at our house while they were drinking. But as soon as they get sober, they were gone.
So
And
just to clarify, he would not like you as a child, as a 12, 13-year-old child, unless you were drinking.
right, he didn't like anybody unless they were drinking. I was a daily drinker at my mom's house at 10 years old. I had at
At
least
10.
one drink at my mom's house at 10 years old. And we had open access. Nobody was checking, nobody was looking at it. My stepdad, his thing was he liked the boat. We would go out on the boat and drink all day, and my mom would say, "You can have one." And my stepdad would put our drinks in a koozie, and as soon as we were done, sink our bottles and give us another one. And my mom just thought we nursed drinks all day. And so, like, she wasn't paying enough attention, and he was not interested in being around people that weren't drinking. So that was our life with my mom and my stepdad. When I was 13 years old, I was finally able in South Carolina to choose where I lived. I immediately went to live with my mother and said, if my daddy has all three of us, my mom has nobody. She's in this miserable marriage. She doesn't have any of her kids. She's sad all the time. I've got to go live with my mom. Um, so I lived with my mom. I did not see my dad for a while because, I lived very wild. And he was not a fan. So I I broke our relationship off and basically said, like, if you don't like how I live, because I was a crappy kid, then don't, and I won't come here. And so I lived with my mom. Our lifestyle started as I would go out on the boat with my stepdad all day when he wasn't working. He only worked weekends at some point. I don't know exactly when that change happened, but we would go out drinking all day. And then I would come home and crash for a few hours. I would go out with guys that were 20 plus years old. I would sneak out of the house, go drink in cornfields all night. I like to tell people that in Anderson, South Carolina, that's the only thing you have to do, drink in cornfields and get knocked up. So I would go out all night. I would come home, crash for a few hours, and go back out with Ronnie. I don't think I was sober one day from 13 to 15 years old. Like, did not care. And if you don't stop drinking, you don't get hangovers. And that's how I that's how I lived my life for the length of that time frame. And my mom would take Ambien or something else, and she'd drink, and then she would come up. Even when I first moved in with her, she'd come up to my room on a school night. I didn't go to school much after I moved in with my mom, and she'd say, I need to go find out if Ronnie went to the bar. And so I can't drive. I just took Ambien and I had a wine cooler. So I need you to drive. So I started driving in the middle of the night at 13 years old and trying to chase my stepdad down at bars and figure out where he's at. And at this point, camera phones were just now starting to come in between like probably 14, 15 years old is when they like really got popular. So she would take a picture of his truck and send it to him and be like, "You told me you weren't here." So that was kind of the lifestyle that we led all the time. Um, the pivotal moment for me, and I can pinpoint it exactly for you guys, is I went out with my stepdad. Actually, my best friend and I used to sneak out with the same people over and over. It was either my stepbrother or the boyfriend that she was seeing. And we decided not to go out one night. And I remember falling asleep on the couch in one position and then waking up in the same position. I'd never blacked out, never had a problem, could drink grown men under tables. Like had people that would take the alcohol from me thinking she doesn't weigh enough to drink as much as she does. And she's going to die. So I woke up in this spot and my friend is on the computer and I'm like, "Why are you up so early?" And she's like, "Well, I'm not up early. Like I never went to bed." And I was like, why? I've been asleep the whole time." And she's like, "No, we went out and you like, I talked to people. I had text messages on my phone. I had no memory of anything other than I was waking up in the spot that I left." And that kind of scared me a little. And so we decided we're going out on the boat with my stepdad. My mom was a realtor at the time, so she was showing houses or something. And when we get out there, we had gotten coffee drinks, like the Starbucks glass drinks, and we're going. I think he was going to fish or something. He was going to do something, but he was like, "Go ahead and get what you want." And I said, "I think we're just going to like chill and lay out in the sun today." And he looked at me and my 16-year-old friend and said, "Then why the hell did you come out here? What'd you come out here for? If you're not going to drink, like, why are you wasting my time?" And I was like, "Oh my God, there has to be more than this. I don't think I want to live this way anymore. Like, I don't want to be like these people. I don't even like these people. What am I doing?" And I went home and got in bed, and I don't think I woke up for 3 months other than to pee and eat once a day. And my mom finally, after 3 months, because she pays so much attention, came in and said, "Hey, I think something's wrong with you. Like maybe you have mono or something. You haven't really been getting out of bed." She'd come in my room in the morning and she'd say, "Are you going to school?" And I'd say no. And she'd close the door back. And for 3 months that happened. And so she finally was like, "Should we go get your blood tested?" And I was like, I don't think she realizes like how hard this come down is, because I don't think she realizes how much I drink and how skittling pills out of bowls affects you. So I was like, I guess I better get up. So we got my blood drawn and I didn't have mono. But I was like, I guess it's time to like figure out what I'm going to do. And I don't think I can live in this house. But I was a stubborn child. And I sure as heck was not calling my daddy, telling him I was wrong and trying to live with him. He lived in Florence at the time. And so I was like, I'm going to drop out of school. I'm going to get some jobs. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to go home. And that's what I did. And I haven't gone back.
Yeah, I mean, I warned you all at the start we were going to get heavy. Um, yeah, I mean, all right. So I host a few different podcasts. Part of my duties here at Stingray, with Evolving Waves being one of them. And part of my growth in that aspect is to learn how to do research and talk to people off camera, so you can kind of get an idea for what's coming. And I like to think I do a decent job of that. I knew this was going to get intense. The part about going, I have so many follow-ups as a result of what you just said, but the first one that comes to mind is you're talking about going to cornfields as a 12, 13-year-old with 20-year-old guys.
Oh yeah.
That that's illegal.
I'm very fortunate that at that point nothing happened to me. My best friend was 16 years old dating a 20-year-old, and the other one was my stepbrother and his friends. And so like we did go out, and I'm like, and I do need to preface this, my stepdad was also not physically abusive to us. My stepdad liked people that drank. He did not want me drunk to do things to me. That is not how that worked. He just wanted you to, he was a miserable human if he wasn't drunk. And I mean, like, could not live in the same house with him, miserable human when he was sober. When he was drunk, he was the greatest guy in the world. But he was never physically abusive to me or my siblings. It's just one of those weird things that people have quirks, and that was his. My stepdad very, very vividly remember that he carried a cooler of beer in the back of his truck. If he had to work, he would, as soon as he got off, pop a top and drive home with it. He was caught so many times just drinking and driving, but never had DUIs because all the cops knew him. I actually had one of his cousins was a state trooper. My first year driving, I got 23 speeding tickets, and I never paid one of them. Actually, I think I paid one because I didn't want to call him again. I cannot call this man again. But 23 speeding tickets at 16 years old, starting the day I started driving legally by myself. And I'd been driving for years, but I was like, no, don't speed. So, and I still speed a decent amount, but we did not have the legal trouble that we should have had. I was arrested, or not booked or not arrested. The guys that we were out with were arrested a few times for having us out because there was a curfew in Anderson, South Carolina at one point that if you're not family, you can't be out past like midnight with underage people. Probably because of us, if I had to guess, I don't know. So they were arrested or detained twice, I believe. We had one guy that was super drunk and fell off the back of the truck and delayed his medical care because he had road rash all over him. Could have died. Delayed his medical care because if they had showed up to the hospital with us, they would have been arrested. So we had to drop us off and then take him to the hospital. Things like that should change you. They did not. It was the comment of, why did you come out here, that I thought was very odd. And that's what made me go, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore.
Yeah, I'm honestly really impressed that that's what did it, because I would, as someone who did not live that life, my first inclination would be, if the experience with the guy falling off and getting or should have gotten road rash and not wanting to show up to the hospital with you because of the legal troubles, that not doing it for you, yeah. I would have guessed that you never would have figured it out, but right. You did. What was it about that statement that just made something click?
I just thought it was so odd and inappropriate for teenage girls. Like I said, he was never physically abusive to us, and it wasn't about he was not a pedophile. It was not that. It was just so wild to me that we couldn't go out and lay out in the sun and drink coffee drinks with a grown man who's supposed to care for us. And my best friend basically lived with us. She's my best friend from the time we were 3 years old. And so she'd been through the divorce with us. She'd been through all kinds of things. And so I'm like, it's not like she was new. It's not like he was showing off. He legitimately just did not want anything to do with somebody who didn't drink. And I thought, one of his friends used to beat his wife horribly, and he would get drunk and he would go home and he would beat his wife. And when he finally got sober, we did not see him again. And I thought that was odd. But when he said that to me, I went, I cannot do this to myself. I can't do this in life. There's got to be more. And I don't want to be like these people.
Yeah. Like I said, I warned you all at the start, it was going to get heavy. Yeah, there's just so much to unpack there. I'm sure we just discovered 14 more episodes as part of this series. But yeah, so off air, you told me literally that you lived like Lindsay Lohan, and then you just shared details, and it was even wilder than that. So the act of turning your life around, I'm sure, is something that requires a lot of mental fortitude. There's also got to be, and maybe I'm sure you can speak to this because I have no idea about this, but there has to be a physical toll that takes too. Tell me about that.
So my body, I look fine. I'm 35 years old. I actually look really young for my age. It's falling apart from the inside. My last surgery, I've had 3 surgeries now, all in my stomach, but damage that has been done based on the things that I've done when I was young. One of them before I had my son, I was going into acute kidney failure, having infections all the time, couldn't pinpoint it. I had an infection that was misdiagnosed for 3 years, and I had stunted growth in my kidney, and probably stunted growth in general because I had lots of drug and alcohol issues at 13 to 15. So my last surgery, she told me I had a bunch of repairs done. She said, you have 2 conditions that affect 1% of women over 80. And I was like, yeah, that tracks. based on how I feel, that also is valid. But I am constantly in pain. I have a lot of scar tissue. I have a lot of fibromyalgia type issues. I feel like, and I tell people this all the time, it's going to make it sound better than it is, but you don't realize how much pain you're in until you have felt the pain melt off your body. And when you do opiates. That's what happens. For some people, not for everyone. So there's people that will tell you like, oh, I had to take pain pills for a surgery and I hated them. I hated the way they made me feel. And I'm like, you did not experience the same thing I did. And so like, you're never going to feel great again because you know what it's like to have pain melt off your body. But there are things that you can do to know that like my life now is better than my life as a junkie, and I'm not going to die on the street, and I'm not going to be homeless, and I can afford the things I want to afford. I can have custody of my child and raise him. So like all of that matters to me more. But it is very, very difficult to navigate chronic pain when you look healthy and young and you're falling apart from the inside. So those are things that I like battle every day and just work through.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's something that, like you said, with the quote about you have two conditions that affect 1% of women over 80.
Yeah.
That's a soundbite. We're gonna be highlighting that clip quite a bit in our marketing for this podcast. But so yeah, we'll get into your transition from a child into a parent in the next part of the series. But just for now, we won't give too much away about it. But just how did all of this? How did your upbringing, the surgeries, your relationship with your mother, all of that? How did that shape your parenting style?
I do the best that I can every day, which is what anybody can ask for in parenting. But I dive in with my kid to everything he loves. Like Rylan has a little business. It's 3D printing business. He's presented at 1 million cups. He got into dinosaurs at one point. We know everything there is to know about dinosaurs. He was into He's into lizards and reptiles now. We have a lizard. We've had 2 lizards and a tree frog that we caught outside just to study. Like, I make sure that if he tells me he is interested in something, that we go all in and I learn it with him, because that's how you keep kids interested and on track. Because if I told him, like, great, you're into dinosaurs, go read about them, he'd be like, no thanks. So I'm very particular about that. I'm also very open. Rylan has watched me work in sobriety. He goes to board meetings with me. He knows the struggles that people face. He has seen firsthand. My brother has been in and out of jail and in and out of rehabs, currently in rehab in Anderson. He has seen that his whole life. He knows that we talk about drugs and alcohol very regularly. We talk about, if he goes to parties, I'm not crazy. I don't think he's going to never drink or try things, but just talk to me about it. Don't drive. I'll have an Uber set up in case he doesn't want to call me. Like, we talk about that now, and he's 11. So he's known since he was little, like, this is a problem that we have genetically, your predisposition to substance abuse. And so like, we need to be proactive, preparing for what might come, looking for signs if there are some. You could easily be the sober kid at the party. And I used to tell him all the time, I'm like, be the guy behind the camera, not the one riding the bike off the roof into the pool. Like, if you're the film guy, you're usually safe. So we've talked about this for his whole life, and I have only done that because of all the things I went through. I can't save him from everything, and I'm well aware of that. I am the parent who will say, if you tell me where you're going and you're honest about it, then you can go. And because I know he's going to go anyway. So like, I knew that when I was sneaking out of the house, my mom probably wouldn't have cared. She did tell me at one point she wouldn't have cared. But I also didn't want my mom to know anything. Like, I was really, because we didn't have a great relationship, and I felt like the parent all the time. So I was like, she doesn't get to know anything. I don't want him feeling that way. I want him feeling like, if I tell my mom, she's going to be cool about it, and we're going to talk about it, and she's on board, because I'd rather know what party you're going to and be able to find you if I need to, than to just find you not in your bed.
And essentially, you learned to do this. You picked up this parenting style by what you experienced as a child, and in some aspects, watching your mom not be that way.
Right. My mom really thought we were best friends. Like, I led her to believe that a lot because I didn't want to give her all the information. My mom, because she thought she was super cool, and she was kind of out of her mind a lot of times anyways, like not really accessible, sleeping, headaches, taking pills and drinking. Like,
The results of
it
living
was,
like she
yeah, it was like she thought we were besties, and when she found things out, she'd be like, what? No. Um, So it's one of those things where I want open communication and I don't want him fearing that I will say no to things. So we talk about it and we even talk about like, what do you think the best option is and what's going to benefit you most in life? Like that's how I want him to think about things. I want him to go, if I want to get into Yale and I go to this party and it gets busted and I'm in trouble for underage drinking, I might not get into Yale. So is this benefiting your end goal or is it not? And when he's older, he'll, get more of that. But right now it's more like, his friends are possibly starting to pick up vapes. And I'm like, okay, if you want to sing on Broadway, which he does, my niece does, but I'm like, you don't pick up a vape, right? Like that doesn't benefit the goal. So if your life goal is to do anything, you have to, even at 11, make strides to get to that end goal. And if your goal changes, that's fine too. But make the best decision you can with the information you have.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I mean that all makes sense to me. It's kind of the approach my parents took. I think they also knew that they couldn't shield me from everything. I think you've understood that. And also telling a little kid, no, don't do that is not going to improve the odds that they actually don't do that.
Right.
So I can understand that because my parents have told me the same thing about their parenting approach to me. But you almost didn't get to be a parent. I mean, I think watching or listening to your story now, what you had to go through from ages 12 to 15 or so, it would have seemed very unlikely that you'd ever be a parent.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment that you described to me and off air that you were on your road to recovery and you almost had a relapse during one of your second surgeries. So talk to us about that as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Rylan was 18 months old when that happened. So I had my second surgery. I had tubal clamps placed. So before I had Rylan, I was very adamant I didn't want kids. I was not healthy. I didn't feel like I had a good role model for having children. I didn't think I could do it. So I was like, I don't want that. And I had a lot of issues reproductively and with birth controls and things. So I was like, I want my tubes tied to make sure. Well, a month after I had my tubes tied, I found out I was pregnant. It didn't fail. I was pregnant when it happened. One of my issues is radically wild hormones. And so, like, my hormones don't show up the way everybody else's does. You're supposed to show on a test within 10 days of getting pregnant. I was 6 weeks and 3 days my first positive test. So, like, wildly late on a test. So, when I went in for my surgery, they didn't detect that. After I found out I was pregnant, I stopped breastfeeding when I had Rylan and I started having all these issues and they wouldn't go in and get these clamps. These clamps were the worst decision I've ever made. I do not recommend implanting anything in your body that you don't need. You don't know how it will affect you until it's too late. And then there is very little recourse for getting that, taken care of. Insurance doesn't often cover it. It's a lot of work and a lot of money. So I finally had, when Rylan was about 18 months old, I had my left clamp had dislodged, and which happens a lot when you have implants, they can move in your body. So it fell off the tube and it implanted into my left ovary. And I had been having all these issues, and my doctor kept saying, I don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe the baby messed you up. Like, maybe, I don't know. But it's not the clamps. And so I had a miscarriage 2 years, almost 2 years when Rylan was little. And then I had these cysts come up. And I went into the hospital. I thought I was dying. I was like, I haven't had my kidneys checked since Rylan was born. I thought it was fine. Like, my kidneys actually corrected when I was pregnant, which is awesome. So I do tell him he saved me. But when they went in to get the cysts that had not ruptured, because I had two on the same ovary, they found out that the clamp had embedded in the ovary and it was necrotic. And so that was part of the issues, was I had this massive infection for a long time. And he took the clamps, most of my left ovary, and I think he panicked. I think he panicked because he realized he was wrong for 3 years. Like, I had been living with these clamps for 3 years and telling him there were problems and seeing him all the time. And he kept telling me, no, 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 it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's not the clamps. It's probably the baby. I don't know. So I have so much scar tissue on my left side of my stomach because of rough surgical practices, is what I was told. That you cannot get imagery on my stomach, which is part of the issue with the chronic pain, is like I have so much scar tissue and it's so compact that like you can't see through it. So if I have another cyst or anything, you can't visualize it. And I ended up having a hysterectomy and a couple other things at 31. So I'm like, all of that is a lot of damage. All of that is, I wasn't supposed to have children because I wasn't I felt like I wasn't healthy enough and I wasn't motherly enough. And now we're here.
That's really heavy. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how to react to that as a male, but I mean, as a human being, I mean, there's I don't need to have those, I don't need to have ovaries or uterus or those types of parts to understand that there's a very serious issue here that
Right.
I think it goes back to the start of the conversation, right? About how we all have empathy baked into us. And it just comes out there that that's incredible that you've gone through all of that. You said two ovarian cysts. You had an issue with the clamps for 3 years, and here you are as the Megan Brown that I know that runs a million cups every Wednesday with Campbell. No one would know any different if they just walked in and heard you speaking for 10 minutes. They'd think nothing's wrong. They think there is just a totally normal childhood that led to this.
Right. And I do present like a very healthy person. I look like an athlete. Like I have a build that looks like I'd run every day. And I'm like, no, if I run, it's painful. I do not run. Oh, but to your question or to your point, my second surgery was rough and they sent me home with Oxy and they know in my chart that I have this history and that I shouldn't have it. And he was like, you are gonna need it. Like you can't recover from the surgery without it. So I am very, very proactive. I know my issues, I know how to avoid them. I'm quick to fall asleep because I'm exhausted all the time. So I would take my pills and go to sleep. This is the way I avoid any issues. If I have to take something, I will take it and I'll go straight to sleep. And I stayed up one night talking to my ex husband, and the pain melted off my body. And I was like, whew, this is going to be a problem. And it was, and I let it go for about 5 days. I had done the surgery and had the flu, and I was like, this is going to be a problem. So I let it go for about 5 days, and I finally told Ryan, I said, you got to take my pills. And he said, no, I think you still need them. You just recovered from the flu. You had this major surgery. Like, no. And I was like, you don't understand. We have a 2 year old. Like, you don't know what it's like being with a junkie. And I promise you, you don't want to. I can't afford to relapse. You have to take them. And he took them. And I just made it with Advil and breathing.
I cannot imagine how painful that was.
It's not my favorite memories, but I will say I'm very good at counting. That's what I do when I'm in pain. I count a lot. I tell myself you can do anything for X amount of time, no matter what it is. So I'll count for if sometimes hours if I'm just at home doing nothing, sometimes minutes, and I just at some point I'll go. If I haven't reached for pain meds, I don't need them. So I'll stop counting and be like, clearly I don't need it, and that's how I convince myself that like we don't have to do that.
That is astounding. And like I said a second ago, no one would know any of this if they just went into a million cups and heard you speak for a few minutes to talk about what a million cups is and what it's all about. Um, and we'll get to more about your adult road in the next couple of pieces of this series. But to wrap up part one, what advice does grown woman Megan Brown have for little girl Megan Brown? And I'm sure there's a lot, but what
There's
specifically?
actually not. So
No.
I love this question, and I've sat with my life a lot. Um, I I feel like we're not supposed to change things or prepare for things, and so I would not be the same person had I not gone through all of this. I would be probably a crappy, like really bad person if I had to guess. I've thought about this a lot because I sit and go, if I didn't have parents that separated and I didn't have, all of these experiences with drugs and alcohol, nothing would have ever hit me. And when you don't get hit, you're naive, I think. And so like I think a lot of people find that they enter adversity later in life when they had this like great childhood where not much happened. And they're hit with like, I married the doctor that had lots of money, but that doctor isn't the greatest husband. And now you're looking for battered women shelters or whatever. So I think my advice would be like, you can do it, is all I would ever say. And just like let her keep going because I did it, but I didn't need the advice. And I don't know that I would change anything because I think I would be a worse person if I had.
Well, you're a pretty great person, and we'll talk about that. We're not going to give too much away, like I said in part one of our three-part series on Megan Brown. But Megan, it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to get this far with you in your conversation. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of pieces in your story as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course, looking forward to the rest of your story. And just remember, y'all, in the face of adversity, there's always the opportunity for growth, development, and success. So be sure to come back and watch the next couple of pieces on Megan Brown and see exactly how she rose from being the I'll use her words, being living like Lindsay Lohan, from that to becoming the successful adult that she is today.
Thank you.